Good morning, everybody. We are just going to wait a few seconds as the numbers continue to climb up. For those that are new here, this is one of our WIN conversations that we host quarterly. WIN, if you don't know, the acronym is Women in Nonprofit. It's a network that was created in 2019 in partnership with the Red Sox Foundation and the Women's Foundation of Massachusetts, in an effort to make sure that female nonprofit leaders could connect, learn, and collaborate often and frequently, because if you're like me, it feels like we're sort of in a silo sometimes in the work that we do, and we wanted to create a safe, welcoming, engaging space where we all could convene around topics that are driven by our membership group, which is 300 plus strong right now. And this conversation I'm incredibly excited for, because we're going to be diving into a very timely conversation about AI. Before I get into our speakers and our sponsors, I do want to run through some housekeeping, which we all know, but just as a reminder, we are going to have an open format. You can see all the participants. I think folks will be pinned that are speaking. And so we'll have a little bit more focus on the speakers as they pop up, but we all can see everyone that's attending, which is really, really nice, because part of the goal of WIN is to connect you all, not only bring you into conversations and topics and information, but make sure that you all can meet each other in sort of the audience there. And so please make sure you're talking to each other, and more importantly, asking us questions. This format really allows you in the chat box to ask us direct questions as we're speaking. So if at any time you have a question for myself or our guest speaker, Dr. Felicia Newhouse, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. We will do our best to get to them and answer them in real time. So that's why we love this format. We have about 70 people registered for the conversation today. So looking forward to having a robust group. As always, we will record this conversation and send it out to everybody post this morning so you can watch it and share it with your teams. If you have any resources that you find helpful, AI related or non-AI related, one recommendation we had from a member was to also pop that in the chat. Our team on the Red Sox Foundation will be monitoring the chat to make sure we're pulling out any conferences, speakers, books, events that you find helpful that you think others in this group would like. Please share those resources and we can collect them and share them post-meeting with each other. But that's a great way that we can all keep each other informed. And then, as always, we'll have a nice raffle. And my team just let me know that we have really good raffle items today. We are going to be raffling off 2 pairs of tickets to a New York Yankees game, Boston Red Sox versus Yankees game in June. That's June 27th. It's a day game on a Saturday, 1:10 p.m. Yankee Sox game. So we'll be raffling off 2 pairs at the end of this conversation about 10:45. So make sure you stick around for that. And last but not least, we'll have a link pop up at the end of today's conversation. That link is really, really short, but really, really important. It helps us determine what the next topic of conversation will be. So please take the 25 seconds to fill that out and let us know if next time you want to hear about development and fundraising or board development or more AI and tech. But whatever you want to hear, we'll congregate and figure out the best panelists and experts and bring that back to you in the next conversation that we have. Whew. All right. I think that was all the housekeeping. Next, I'd love to bring up our sponsor who has been at this table for several years, and we could not be more grateful for Bank of America. Brittany Macomber is here again, and we're so grateful that she's here. Brittany, for those that don't know, can do it all. She just participated in the Fenway Park Marathon. Yes, we had a crazy group of close to 100 people run 113 laps around Fenway Park to raise money for the Red Sox Foundation and another foundation, and Brittany was one of them. So she helped complete a marathon in Fenway Park. So thank you, Brittany. But she is also the Senior Vice President of Greater Boston Community Relations and manager at Bank of America, and a friend. And so, Brittany, I'd love you to pop up and say a few words on behalf of Bank of America.
Great, thank you. And Becca's giving me too much credit. I actually only ran a half marathon. I was part of a relay team, so did 56 laps, not 113. But it was such a great evening, such a great cause, obviously supporting you all at the Red Sox Foundation. But thank you. Thank you to the entire Red Sox Foundation team on the line today and the team over at the Women's Foundation of Massachusetts. for all of your leadership in bringing this group together and this community, rather, because that's really what it's become. And then a special thank you to Dr. Felicia Newhouse for being with us and taking the time out of your day to share your expertise in this space, especially during a time where we're all navigating the power of AI and how to really leverage that for efficiency. As Becca mentioned, I'm a community relations manager at Bank of America, supporting our work in advancing economic mobility across Greater Boston and Massachusetts. And how we do that through our nonprofit partnerships and community investments, which is why we're so proud of this partnership and the WIN network, because by investing in your leadership and your networks, we're really, investing in the future of our communities. So I hope that you all take away something new today. I know I most certainly will. So, before I turn it back to Becca to jump into our discussion, just want to thank you all for not only being here today, but the work that you do every day to, really make our community stronger here in Massachusetts and across New England. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Becca.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Like Brittany, I'm so excited for this conversation. I came to learn of Dr. Felicia Newhouse through a Globe article, which many of you may have seen in earlier May 11th. There was an article that talked about how women specifically are making AI more inclusive, especially women in Boston. And that was important in the article because the article noted that women's jobs were more at risk from AI, while women have less influence over its development and use. And it cited some interesting, sort of alarming statistics, which were noted through a Brookings Institution study that found that among the roles most at risk due to generative AI, 86% of the workers are women. They were admin positions, they were cashiers, they were back office workers. Meanwhile, only 22% of AI related jobs worldwide are held by women. So while it's great that Boston's sort of leading in many ways, we collectively have a far way to go. Felicia was cited a lot of times in many ways in that article. So I clearly had to go online and sort of find her and figure out how we could make sure she could bring forth some of that knowledge to this group, because she's obviously an incredibly valuable source of information, but also inspiration. And so I'm so grateful for her to take time out. She's literally waiting, doing this conversation, and then jumping into another award ceremony at 11 o'clock. And I'm actually really proud and excited to share, this is hot off the press, that she was just named to the Boston Globe's 2026 list of top tech power players, which is one of the most 50 influential leaders shaping the future of tech innovation and societal impact. So, Felicia, we're so proud of you and grateful for your time here. In addition to that, she is the founder of AI Powered Women, which convenes technologies, enterprise leaders, researchers, psychologists, philosophers, creatives, and policymakers to explore how humanity can shape AI responsibly, consciously, and in service to a healthier future. Woo! That is incredible and impressive and amazing. I think I can speak on behalf of everybody in the audience right now that I'm just so not only grateful, but excited to hear what you have to share. And, as we frame this conversation, I want folks to know this isn't a conversation that's meant to talk about just how scary AI is. I think what we loved about Dr. Felicia's background is she can really explain, how we should be leaning into AI and how this is not a super scary moment. We've been through these moments before, and that we are prepared for this. And it's about how we continue to educate ourselves and lean in to make sure that we can be as responsive, informed, educated, and prepared as possible. And so with that, welcome, Dr. Felicia Newhouse. I'm going to jump right into the questions because we've got some real good ones. And as I mentioned to the audience, please put some questions in the chat. Felicia and I are prepared to address those real time. So as we're speaking, just pop them in, but let's get started. So I just sort of mentioned that we're at a moment where the word AI is everywhere. I feel like every article, TV show, everything online, social media is AI. And in our world, it's boardrooms, it's articles, it's research, it's in the front offices. But I want you to ground us from your perspective. What feels different fundamentally about this technological transition compared to others that we've lived through? Because I think people forget that we have lived through moments like this. And why should nonprofit leaders be paying really close attention to this moment?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And by the way, hi everybody, I'm Felicia, and I'm excited to be here. And nonprofits have a very special place in my heart, so I'm excited to be here amongst all the leaders here. I think when we step back and we look at technology, right? Technology has a lot of different forms. We think of technology in a modern day context, but there's technologies that go back. I mean, you could even argue that language is a technology. The printing press was a technology, right? The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about machines. It was also about, it changed labor, family systems, education, cities, class structures, even our relationship with time. And the printing press, right? If we think about that, it wasn't just about books, actually. If you look at the history on the printing press, it actually changed who had access to knowledge. It disrupted religious authority, it expanded literacy, it reshaped political power. And I think when we think about AI, that's a big piece to all of this is power. What we're looking at is not just a technology, it's a complete shift in power. And when we think about the internet that came before AI, it didn't just connect computers, right? It changed attention and relationships and media and trust and adolescence or children, public life, how we connect with one another. And so when people say, oh, AI is just another tool, I think that really misses the deeper pattern. Technology becomes civilizational when it changes identity and power, labor, knowledge, and social structure. So to answer your question, I think what feels different about AI is that it's moving into cognitive work. So it's not only helping us move faster or produce more. It's really beginning to participate in writing, research, analysis, communication, decision support, tutoring, fundraising, operation, strategy. And I think it's also changing speed. And when you think about humans, we move really slow. The human brain moves slow. It likes to move slow. And actually, when we think about creativity and how we create as humans, we need slowness to be beautifully human. That's actually what is beautiful and unique about being a human is we need that slowness. And trust develops slowly. Our relationships develop slowly. You didn't go out with your if anybody's married, you didn't just go out with your spouse and be like, oh yeah, we're getting married tonight. Like there's a relationship, there's a trust that has to take over. Humans move slow. Culture also develops slowly. Governance, ethics, these things develop slowly. And I think leadership maturity also develops slowly. But AI capabilities are shifting daily and monthly. And so it's unlike anything we've ever seen. The speed is unprecedented. So the gap between technological acceleration and human readiness is really that defining tension right now. And I think for nonprofit leaders here, I think it's really important to pay very close attention because, nonprofits often meet the human consequences first. Workforce instability, education gaps, loneliness, mental health strain, distrust and people trying to figure out where they belong in a rapidly changing world. And I think there's a lot of anxiety and fear, and all that comes with this acceleration of change. And I think just one last point is what's interesting about the work we're doing at AI Powered Women is we're really looking at women in all of this. So AI Powered Women, we have a leadership platform, we do training and certifications, we have our conferences at MIT and globally. But the woman layer that we look at, the reason why we're focusing on women is not just a gender and equity issue. We actually look at it as a innovation issue, a societal issue at a time where we're at an inflection point with this technology and women are not being part of these conversations enough. And interestingly, when you look at the roles that women represent, women tend to be overrepresented in roles like AI ethics, AI governance, human resources. They're closer to people, they're closer to human consequence in a lot of the roles that they're in, despite whatever industry they're in. And so what happens is interestingly, they become like the canary in the coal mine with this technology around, hey, we're seeing firsthand what the human consequence is of this. However, on the flip side, you have women being vastly underrepresented in the rooms where AI deployment is happening, the critical technology decisions are happening, and capital deployment is happening. And so those rooms where the actual power sits, women tend to be vastly underrepresented. So you can see that there's a disconnect there. And I hope that changes. But that's why in this moment, we find it so important to focus on women leaders and how to really bridge that gap.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna ask you, well, how do we change that? And I don't know if we have time to talk about taking down the patriarchy. We can save that for another conversation.
Come to the conference, everybody.
Yeah. But seriously, you make a great point that women aren't represented in those spaces. But I want to dissect that comment about women even more and think more directly about nonprofit and community leaders. Because when I look around this table of leaders in the room right now, we're all women and we're all sort of driving community action, and we're sitting at the center of a lot of need and moments in our community and people in our community that don't have voices. So we're not being voiced, but we're also trying to be the voice of people that don't have voices. So we're like doubly important, if that makes sense. And so long-winded way of saying, how do we get sort of nonprofit community leaders, sort of direct service providers in this conversation of AI when we think about human consequences? Because it clearly is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I mean, I think nonprofits are extra important in all of this because they sit closest to human
Yeah.
consequence. And we happen to be in a call right now where we also have women nonprofit leaders, right? So it's kind of the double whammy.
Yes.
So I think nonprofits are uniquely positioned because they sit closest to that human consequence of disruption. And so when jobs change, when families are under stress, when young people are struggling, when communities lose trust, when people feel isolated or left behind, nonprofits are where those realities show up first, right? So that gives nonprofit leaders a responsibility and also a tremendous opportunity. Um, I don't think the responsibility is to become AI experts overnight. I think it's really to become translators and stewards. So I wouldn't put the pressure on yourself to become this, tech or AI expert overnight. And a lot of the leaders I talk to, they feel that pressure. They feel the FOMO. They feel the reactivity of the market. And that's actually exactly where AI powered women, where we're focusing on, because we see there's a situation where we've got organizations who are investing billions in AI technology, but they're under investing in the human systems like leadership and workforce readiness, ethics, governance, that are needed to actually make it successful.
Mhm.
So I think there's a really interesting opportunity there for the organizations that choose to focus on that, because what I see when I look ahead, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months, I see a world where we're going to start to crash and burn because we've over invested into the technology rather than all the human systems around it. So I think that's going to increasingly become more and more important. So I think translators help people understand what's changing and what's not changing, what opportunities exist, and where caution is needed. And stewards, they ask the deeper questions like, who is being helped? Who is being harmed? What are we optimizing for? What should remain human? And what kind of communities are we building? I remember reading that the US Surgeon General's workplace well-being framework, they talk about things like protection from harm, connection and community, mattering, work-life harmony, and growth. And those aren't just wellness ideas anymore. They're becoming core conditions for healthy adaptation in the AI era. And that goes for leadership too. We talk a lot about this at our conference, where we bring neuroscientists on stage and philosophers on stage, along with the technologists and the enterprise operators. But by bringing all these different perspectives together, psychologists as well, we start talking about that the soft skills that leaders needed 10, 20 years ago are actually now becoming the hard skills that are needed for this next generation in the coming decades. Things like empathy, emotional intelligence, systems thinking, systems awareness, understanding that as a leader, you're part of a broader global ecosystem and that all of the technology decisions you're making have downstream impact. And we have to start to see how all of these systems interconnect. So these types of skills are becoming much more important and being an interdisciplinary and multidimensional thinker as a leader. And I think with nonprofits, they already understand that human beings aren't machines. I mean, I would think that for most people going into nonprofit leadership, that's part of what draws them there. And so that wisdom is going to matter more, not less in the decades ahead.
Yep. Yep. Well, this next question is one of my favorites. And, I start by asking sort of AI is already being used for grant writing, donor comms, research, and operations. But I do want to actually stop there and make sure that in the audience, some people might not already be using AI to support those functions of their nonprofit organization. So could you actually spend a moment, because I think this might be really helpful for folks in the audience, how can AI help grant writing, donor comms, research, and operations within a nonprofit organization? Like what are some real tactical, technical applications that folks can take away today to help amplify and automate in many ways? Because we all know grant writing can seem very monotonous sometimes, and research takes a long time. How can we leverage AI to make those functions easier and better?
Yeah. And so you're asking for more of like a technology application or just general kind of leadership?
Yeah. I mean, all of the above, I guess, like maybe
Yeah.
some good softwares, but also some like how just even start doing that. I think we were talking this a bit before we started today, is like where to start doing and how to start doing some of this AI leaning in for the fundraising of a nonprofit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, just to get kind of tactical and technical here, I mean, we have applications like Notion is a really great one that I always recommend starting with. When I think about grant writing and I think about any of these projects, they're projects, right? Like with grant writing, you have a series of steps, right? And a lot of that pulls from a knowledge base. So when you think about your knowledge base is going to include your own brand, your organization's KPIs, right? Your long-term goals, the types of aligned partners, the types of funds you're looking at, right? So there's all this various data. And so the number one first step is always organizing your data, right? So look at the taxonomy, the infrastructure of your data itself. So without getting too technical on this call, because there's a lot to say about that, Notion is a great tool to organize a knowledge base and to be able to layer AI on top of that. Then you can start running agents on top of that to search for different grants, to write the grants themselves, to structure that work pipeline, and be able to save a ton of time doing it. Because grant writing is, at the end of the day, AI is looking for the organization of patterns, right? So it's going to look for the patterning across all the grants you've already written, the types of partnerships you've already built, the types of words that you form uniquely as a leader, but also as a nonprofit entity, right? So we want to feed all of that into an AI so it can start to train on it, organize on it, and then be able to scale it, right? And so you have those efficiencies in place to just boom, get that process down into just mere minutes or hours. So
right. And you still recommend though a human on the very end, like line reviewing all this before submission, right?
yeah, so we talk a lot about human in the loop and a lot of the our academy and everything like that. So the simple framework I usually recommend is, automate tasks, augment people. So AI is incredibly good at processing information, but humans are still uniquely responsible for processing meaning, and that's always going to be the case. So if you think about it in a nonprofit context, I mean, AI is It can help analyze thousands of donor records or identify patterns in community needs. It can summarize research, draft grant proposals, generate reports, automate administrative workflows. And for resource-constrained nonprofits, which many are, those efficiency gains can be incredibly valuable. But nonprofit work is fundamentally relational. So AI can identify a student who may be struggling, but it can't replace the trust that develops between, say, a mentor and a young person, right? Like AI can help segment donors, but it can't build the authentic relationships that inspire someone to make a transformational gift, right? So so rather than asking, what can we automate? I think leaders should ask things like, where is information processing the actual bottleneck? And where are trust and judgment and accountability and human connection the bottleneck? Those are very different things. So for most of human history, you look at, how information was very scarce and relationships were abundant. Where today information is abundant and trust and relationships are actually becoming increasingly scarce. And I was actually talking to somebody about this yesterday, just how interesting it is with the data with social media, like how humans are fundamentally connecting is starting to actually revert to how it used to be. The social media graphs are actually showing tremendous amounts of disengagement and they're plummeting. People are actually moving off of social media platforms. You have a lot of AI generated content and fake videos, and people are starting to build more distrust with anything that's online based community. And they're starting to crave the in-person convenings. So that in-person trust is shifting back again. So you're seeing a huge spike in things like, because we run conferences too, and we have these in-person convenings, but we also have, private communities where there's more trust. People are wanting to move into those realms now and away from just kind of the generic social media. So I guess at the end of the day, like you want to look at that automate tasks, augment people, because it's really about like using AI where it removes friction from work while preserving and strengthening the moments where humans create trust and belonging and meaning and accountability. So the goal shouldn't be to replace human connection. It should be to free humans to just, spend more time with things that only humans can do. And I think in the nonprofit sector, those things are often the very heart of the mission, where it's all about relationship building and mentorship and community trust, stewardship and helping people navigate the complexity of being human. So.
Totally. Yeah. And that was my follow-up question is like, where's that line between automation and relational, necessity in a nonprofit? Because you said it perfectly, like at the heart of all of our work and the success of nonprofits is relationship building, whether that's with your board, with a donor, with a program participant, the community members. It's all about that human interaction. However, I do think there's still space for folks to leverage AI in ways that could still feel somewhat human. And by that, I mean, yes, will it ever replace the relationship that I can make one-on-one with someone? No. But can it augment mentoring in SAT training that I might do with a person one-on-one? Yeah, like that could supplement it, right? But I still want to have that human connection. So I do think it's still important for organizations, to your point, think about those friction points and think about where within the organization you feel things can be automated without losing the human touch. And there are many. And I think that's where we sometimes not fail, but like I know personally, I continue to see places where I'm like, oh my God, Claude could do that for me. Like, why am I doing that? Right? Like, why am I summarizing a 19-page email and spending 40 minutes reading it? It can do that for me. And so I do think there's places, especially for people that are older, to make sure that they're really leaning in and taking advantage of what can lessen some of your time.
Yeah, and to the flip side of what you just said too, what I've seen people is over relying on Claude for
Right.
certain things too that are actually fundamentally human. So an example of that is like in the early stages of brainstorming, right? When you're like brainstorming a new initiative or something very creative, you don't want to run right to AI for that. The reason for that is because you're essentially you're not tapping into the human power. Like you have to tap into the human power before you go to AI, because AI is going to take that seed, that kernel of what's uniquely human about you and then build upon it. So you want to keep that seed yours, right? So before you sit down and go into a project and brainstorm, sit with yourself, literally meditate. We do a lot of mindfulness and meditating with AI Powered Women at our conferences. And the reason for that is because we find that a lot of that creativity comes from that uniquely human source when you can sit with yourself and sit with those ideas, sit with your team, and just have that blank slate, because that's where true innovation is coming from. And then from that place, even if the idea is really rough, then bring that into the AI, right? Bring that into the LLM, or whatever you're doing, and then have it build upon that. And then it's seated with, it understands like that unique piece that you bring.
Totally. And my Claude won't know how Tyler thinks or Michaela thinks or Maggie thinks. Like I need to leverage that diversity of thought, that diversity of human thought. To your point in that initial brainstorming, absolutely. We have a great question from Jen at Commonwealth Kitchen asking if Notion could replace things like Asana. Do you?
Yes, it can.
Yeah.
Yes, so there are team features on Notion, so you can do all kinds of team collaboration on that.
Okay.
Asana's great. I mean, it's great in its own way, but Notion is pulling from your actual knowledge base. So there's just more you can do with Notion because you can run agents on top of that. You can share out with your team. You can build your own board of tasks, just like Asana, and tag your team members and all of that. So yeah, all of those features are built into Notion. There's actually like Notion experts out there that you can work with too that will help teams build this out. So I actually have someone that I can recommend to if anybody wants referrals. But yeah, I've found it helpful to work with someone at first to do that because Notion can be a little bit overwhelming at first.
Great. This question gets sort of right to, it's a very direct question, which is, some leaders do feel behind in AI right now, and like they've missed the start of the race, and and they don't know where to start or how to start. What would you say to an executive director who hasn't had that or hasn't leaned into AI yet, and feels a little bit intimidated of where to start? Is it too late? Like what would you say?
It's definitely not too late.
Okay. Good.
You're not behind.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say if you meet anybody that calls themselves an AI expert, I would say that's a red flag. I would be very cautious of those people because there's literally nobody right now that is an AI expert. It's moving too fast. I mean, even the people that I know that are building this stuff from like a raw level and building the models, they still don't understand it. Like there's a lot about this that is still very black boxy. So honestly, most organizations are still figuring this out. I mean, research is actually showing that I think it was like 70% of leaders don't believe their workforce is AI ready, and nearly 80% of employees say they feel underprepared to use AI effectively. So I think the mistake is believing you need a comprehensive AI strategy before you start. You don't. And I think whether leaders realize it or not, AI is showing up inside organizations already through like staff and volunteers and software platforms and donor systems and marketing tools and grant writing and just like everyday workflows. So I think it's really about asking, where is AI already influencing decisions in our organization? Because ultimately, governance isn't really a technology conversation. It's a decision-making conversation. Like who makes the decisions? What decisions require human oversight, like human loop? What data are we using? What risks are we willing to take? What should never be automated in our organization that we're just not comfortable with ever automating? So those are really governance questions, and nonprofit leaders deal with them every day. So I would say, yeah, don't start with an AI strategy. Start with an AI conversation with your leadership team and your board, and map where AI is already showing up, and identify the opportunities and risks, and create some simple guardrails. Build
Yep.
literacy in the organization, and most importantly, make sure the technology remains in service of the mission and not the other way around.
Yep. Laverne just asked literally, Laverne, you're in my head. That was my next question about sort of sensitive and private donor client information. I think this is a big one because a lot of, rightfully so, people have hesitation about putting, even your budgets or all those things into an AI online, because it's privacy, it's data privacy, right? And accountability to the nonprofit for their donors. So can you talk about how nonprofits should approach that aspect of this? Like what shouldn't we be putting into it? What can we share? What can we not confidently share? And how do we just approach this idea of sensitive information online?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think we need to be careful, right? Like you don't want to just dump this stuff into an open LLM. And I will say, we don't know what they're doing with it. They can say a lot of stuff. I always tell people, look at like Facebook, look at Meta, look at what we've been told from a privacy perspective there, and then look at realistically what's happened, right? I mean, if anybody's seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, or any of these that go into kind of like political polling and kind of like shifting opinions and things like that. I mean, they are using our data, right? I mean, it's always kind of that old philosophy around like if you're working with a free system, you're the product, right? So you have to be careful with just open like using these things in an open way. And I think you know, when you think about the vulnerable populations you might be serving, you need to be extra cautious, right? So, I mean, the green light for a lot of this stuff is like public reports, public website content, marketing ideas, event planning, public grant guidelines, public research, but I'd yellow light things like internal strategies, board discussions, unannounced partnerships, financial projections. And then red light, anything like client records or patient information, student information, donor records, right? So you have to be cautious. It doesn't mean that you can't ever use AI with sensitive information. I mean, there's enterprise versions of tools like ChatGPT for enterprise. Microsoft Copilot is popular. It's what most people use these days, honestly. Google Gemini Enterprise, or there's like nonprofit approved AI platforms that have different security controls and data handling policies. But the decisions need to be made intentionally. And the people you serve have entrusted you with their information. And again, these technologies are very early and we don't know what they're going to do with this information. And it like 1 year or 1 decade is no long like time is a very different concept now too. Like things are moving so quickly that the rules could flip very quickly. Like in a few years from now, all that information you put in that you thought was safe could be used in a different way that you weren't expecting. We can't see far enough ahead now around how this information is going to be used potentially against us. So not that you want to get too I don't know, scared or full of fear with all this either, but you do need to be very cognizant of sharing sensitive information.
And so if I'm summarizing what you're saying, free versions like that have the sort of worst,
Yeah.
okay, great. And then the paid versions are the ones that are better, but still you don't know how it's going to be used in the future. Is there a way to opt out? Stupid question. Is there a way to, within a paid version, sort of click somewhere to say you can't use my information?
Yeah, so you can inside ChatGPT, there's a few ways to do that where you can
Okay.
go in and kind of just have like some settings played with there where
Okay.
you can go into it's like a different mode
Okay.
where you just like remove yourself from the chat. It's kind of like going into incognito mode on a
Yep.
internet browser, so you can do that mode as well.
Okay.
So,
Okay. That's good
but
to know.
remember, even if you do that, that's just not identifying you. It could still use the
Right.
information you're putting in. So
Good
you still
point.
have to be careful. Like sometimes, like even now, like I'm still every day that I use a different LLM, I'm looking at how it's thinking. Like when you put a question in, right, you can see how it's like going through the internet and looking at things. And sometimes I'm like, huh, why is it going into like left field over there looking at this stuff over here? So there are things that it's doing that I'm like, this feels like more like it's learning about me than actually directly answering my question. So again, not trying to instill fear in everybody, but there are things here that we don't know. There are black box aspects of this that we want to be very mindful of.
Mm-hmm. So you are so deeply ingrained in this sort of topic and conversation in so many ways. And I'm curious what gives you hope and inspiration? Like, what are you sort of very optimistic about? And then conversely, sort of what's keeping you up at night? What is the most sort of worry that you have for this?
Yeah, yeah. So I it's such a heavy question. I'm trying to keep it
I
light because
know.
there's so many. I think what gives me hope is not the technology. So I'll say that. What gives me hope are the humans. And it also brings me a lot of concern because I think it's, at the end of the day, technology build a house or, go harm somebody. So over the past year, just we started AI Powered Women last January, so it all took off very quickly. And we've had the opportunity to bring together like technologists and anthropologists and psychologists and philosophers, poets on stage, artists, even people that go into like the spiritual and philosophical realms around this. We had a panel with teenagers on it that are talking about, what they wish that we as leaders and adults would do differently. And so it's like kind of bringing all the people into a room where the Venn diagram wouldn't usually overlap. And those are the diverse voices and perspectives we need to start bringing into the room. And so that brings me hope when I see that happening, because a technologist just sees one piece of the puzzle, an anthropologist sees another, a teenager sees another, a nonprofit leader sees another, right? And suddenly the conversation becomes much bigger than the technology. It becomes kind of a whole conversation about humanity and how we are capable of collaborating together to solve these big problems. And throughout human history, none of these technologies have killed us. They haven't been the end of us. They've actually been the evolution of us. And so when I look back and I read the history, and I do that a lot, like that's why I feel so strongly about having anthropologists and historians as part of a lot of the work that we're doing, and framing the research that we're a part of too, is just we have to look back at history, at other technologies where people thought this was the end. Like this was the end of everything we knew. I remember reading about the telegraph. People thought it was a devil, that it was evil, that it was like bringing voices from another realm. And, so there's so many ways that humans have looked at these technologies as the end, and they never have been. They've actually helped us in communicating. And in many ways, they've helped us be better humans. They've also sometimes helped us be worse humans. But I would say net net, we are getting better and we have the capacity to become better. And we have the capacity for the first time in history to solve some of the biggest world problems. Like we literally have the capacity with AI to solve things like cancer, to solve widespread poverty, to solve critical challenges around water quality and drinking water and things that are fundamental problems across the globe. AI is opening up the capacity to look ahead at the next century and really be like, wow, we could actually start solving widespread human suffering. But the very myopic view of the few leaders and power of this right now could potentially lead that astray. And I think that's why we're having these conversations and why there's so much concern, is it's really about the hands that this is falling into and the types of humans that are at the helm. So the question that keeps me up at night isn't whether AI will become more intelligent, it's whether humans will. It's whether we're going to have the leadership maturity and emotional intelligence to handle this technology in a way that actually helps us evolve as a species.
Yep, that keeps me up at night too. Just a note to the audience to keep those questions coming. We've had some good ones so far, but please chat in anything as we're coming down to the wire here with just about 8 more minutes left. So, I do think there might be some folks still sitting out there that might feel genuinely overwhelmed by this, that have yet to engage. This is going to be a 2-part question. They have yet to engage personally, but also might be feeling like, wow, this is such a big monumental moment in our history. Is this something I need to now integrate into my nonprofit as not only for my staff development, but maybe like an arm of support for my constituents and my clients and my program participants? Like, are we heading into a space where everyone will need to be not fluent, but familiar and capable? And so that opportunity gap doesn't continue to widen between our most vulnerable populations and the already typically underserved populations that many of us are in service to. So I guess the first part, and I'll pause after this first part question, is there like, should nonprofits start to think about programming around AI for some of their constituents, and maybe not like a full-on class, but like integrating it in a way that starts to get their populations familiar and comfortable with it, so that we can be part of that solution in lessening that opportunity gap that you spoke about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see everybody jumping on the AI bandwagon, right? You go on LinkedIn or social media or open up the news. I mean, it's everywhere, right? So yes, I don't think it hurts to have programming, make people feel AI literate. And when I say AI literate, I guess how I define that is like being able to do the basics. Like you can interact with an LLM, you understand the basics of a prompt, like the structure of a prompt, like garbage in, garbage out. You understand how to actually like make that prompting efficient. You understand how to string enough tools together to create an AI workflow that creates some efficiencies for your organization. And you understand agentic AI enough to start integrating that into your company, because agentic AI is going to be a huge part of where any, organization needs to head in the next decade. So yes, I do think that we need some basic AI literacy, and that goes for everybody. But I would also be careful and caution around asking, like, how do I keep up with AI and have this anxious kind of standpoint of I need to keep up with every model and every tool and every platform, every breakthrough. And we deal with this AI powered woman all the time because we work with leaders around the globe, and they come in. We have Mastery Mondays and Tooling Tuesdays and Wellness Wednesdays that are more like culture and change management, and Think Tank Thursdays and Founder Fridays that show like women AI founders that are building the tools or look under the hood, how it's been built. So like we have women that come in and they're anxious and they feel like they have to come to every single session, learn every single tool. And we always emphasize it's really the most important thing you can do right now is not learn every tool. It is important to learn, some of the basics and keep up, but it's really about becoming, the kind of leader who can navigate uncertainty. And develop the human capacities that are required to adapt alongside the technology. So that's really looking at you as a leader and your team more generally around, the culture, the team, the leadership, judgment, discernment, curiosity, a workplace culture that, encourages curiosity and innovation, adaptability, ethical decision making, the ability to learn continuously without becoming overwhelmed. And like just from a practical standpoint, I would say, pick one repetitive task this week and spend 30 minutes experimenting with AI of how to automate it. It's not about mastery, it's really about familiarity. And not having fear, but having the curiosity of having kind of a culture of experimentation, and just not thinking you have to have all the answers. And I think this stuff is going to move so fast, honestly, like you can't keep up with it. It's like, so
You're,
don't even try. There's just to
yep.
be AI literate, but focus more on the culture.
Yep. You broke up just a little bit, but I think we got it. And you actually answered what was going to be my final question, which was what's one concrete thing that you would recommend the person that might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed or intimidated by this? What can they do? And you mentioned sort of picking that task. And I want to close also with something else you said, which is that I think it's important that we all remain curious about this and lead with a growth mindset and sort of this idea that we have to be lifelong learners in this space. And like the AI, I'm an expert is a red flag. And just feeling like you don't have to know it all. But just starting somewhere is the most important thing. And knowing that you'll have to continually be open to learning and innovating and growing as a leader, which can feel vulnerable sometimes, but we have to be able to lead that way. And build that culture within our teams too, and our
Yeah.
constituents that, we will always just have to be learning and iterating. And like I said, have that growth mindset. So all fantastic points.
Yeah, and it's holding that in one hand while at the same time holding the human aspects. Like,
Right,
what kind of leader are you? What kind of culture are
right.
you creating? Are you creating a culture of psychological safety? Because when we step back and look at the research and also a lot of the conversations I've been a part of recently with AI, it's going back to like the competitive advantage isn't going to be just like technology and tools. It's going to be, are you capable of navigating change as an organization? And are you creating, a culture where it's more human centric? Because I mean, organizations, if you look 5, 10 years ahead, a lot of it is going to be agentic. A lot of it is going to be AI driven. So the employees that are there that are, creating this kind of, whole new paradigm of workplaces and leadership and organizations, they're going to be very relationship driven. Like, think about if we're just sitting in a room and AI is doing a lot of the stuff, it comes back to like, can you connect with the human next to you? Can you connect to your partners? Can you connect to your sponsors and donors and, the communities you're serving? Because that is never going to be replaced by AI. So yes, like figure out the AI stuff, but also double down in parallel on the human relationships and the human centric aspects of the work you're doing.
It's a perfect way to end. I know on behalf of everybody here, Felicia, thank you so much. This was a
Thank you.
great balance of conversation between sort of the high level, sort of macro, larger societal conversations of the impacts of AI, but also getting into some of the technical sort of what can I do today give me some sort of direction, some recommendations. So it was the perfect balance. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know you're busy and I know you're running off to receive that award. Congratulations again. Very, very, very impressive. So thank you. And you can see all the thanks coming in from the community here in the chat feature. So take a peek there and get that love. I'd love to invite Brittany back on to do our raffle. Brittany, there you are. We have 2 winners that are going to each receive a pair of Yankees Sox tickets. So Brittany, who are the winners?
Yeah. The winners are Jen Fagel and Sarah Johnson.
Oh, let's go. Jen had the first question. That's perfectly fitting. Also, oh, there's Sarah. Yay. Yeah. Yay. That's great. That's awesome. Congrats, Sarah and Jen. Our team can follow up with those tickets, and we'll see you at Fenway Park later on this month. As always, we're going to be sharing this recording out so you can rewatch it or share it within your teams, follow up and ask any questions. Felicia, I know you said that you're happy to share your LinkedIn. We can put that in the chat feature as well, and or share that out via email to the group after this. And thank you so much again for the expertise, the optimism, the encouragement, really, that you've shared with us today. I think it was very, very useful and helpful for some to continue on their journey and others to begin that journey. If anybody has any other recommendations for conferences, other sort of topics of AI they want to dive into, please either email our team or put them in the chat feature. But we will end today with that link to the survey. Michaela actually just put it in the chat feature right there. I can see it, so please click on it. It will take literally 25 seconds to fill it out. We're going to be asking you what you want this next conversation to be. So please take the time to do that. We will also be emailing folks soon because we will be having golf again coming to Fenway Park, and we offer out that opportunity to this group to participate in that. And then Bank of America actually has a wonderful opportunity coming up for folks to attend a Red Sox game as well, thanks to Brittany and the folks over at Bank of America. So keep an eye out for those 2 things for your chance to come over to Fenway Park for some baseball and some golf. But with that, thank you again, Dr. Felicia, and good luck this afternoon or this right after this for your award ceremony. Take care, everybody, and we will see you all soon. Thanks so much.